Hey bud, it's me. So I just wanted to start this off and talk for a minute before I get into showing you anything. Now the first part of what I want to show you has to do with I'm sure you've been learning scales and everything. Now I watched some videos online myself and I thought them to be real helpful to me. Um, Now when you think about doing power chords, you're trying to make a chord progression something that sounds good, something that coincides and all the notes kind of fit together when you're doing a solo and when you're doing a chord progression. So if you think for a minute, with your power chords, the root finger or the very first finger that's on a power chord, whether it be like me and I'd play in a drop D, okay, and it's going to be my low string as my root, or if you're on the second string and you have these, then this finger here on the second string is your root. Now if you think about it like that and think about scales for a minute. So if you think about your scales, like let's take for example this scale. Okay, now that's just going on the strings here, the very first string, okay, first fret, and you skip as you go along. So it's going to be 1, 3, 5, 6, then we go to the next string, number 1, 3, 5, 6. Okay, so now all together it sounds like this. Okay, so in that scale right there, okay, whether you realize it or not, we have a bunch of different, the progression going up and then coming back down. You can go back down too. Okay, but the main idea is that any of those groups of notes that you play when you're doing that scale sound good together, and it doesn't always necessarily have to be that they're in order. Like for example, if we go here, make up some kind of solo or whatever. Here we go. Okay, now think about soloing. Now think about your power chords. So your root finger is this one. So if we're going, okay, so now we're going up a scale with power chords. Now if we continue it on to the second string, remember we go from this one, 1, 3, 5, 6, and then to the next string, 1, 3, 5, 6. Now let's try doing the power chords for it. Again, I'm in a drop D, so you're going to have to tune your guitar down. That's the way this sounds with a drop D. It's different when your lower string is up to an E. So let's first I'm going to go over the power chords now using that scale that I'm playing. Okay, so now we have a scale that we have a group of power chords for. So when you're trying to solo and when you're trying to make a chord progression, you're trying to take a random group of chords or notes and make them go together and sound good. For example, let's just mess around for a minute. I'm going to take my low E string because it's dropped down to a D. So let's try something like this. Okay, now that's just a solo, and all I'm doing here is on my very first string. I got to keep messing with the screen. I'm going like this: 1 to 3 to the next string, 1, back down to a 3 on the low string, and then I go up to here to what is that? 1, 2, 5, 6, and then back to 1. So it goes 1, 3, 3, 3, 1 on the next string to 6. Okay, so now if we take that one note from the string and now we apply the same thing with power chords, instead of just being the one string, now here it's all the way through with just the one string. Okay, now let's put some distortion on and play it as a power chord group. playing the power chords for it, meaning I'm going to use my 3 and it's going to be just the 1 on the low E, and then when I'm up here on my 2nd fret I have to start with the, and do the skip a fret in the other 2. Okay, now let's put some distortion to that. So here's this again. Now let's put distortion on it and use power chords doing it. Now as you can see there, it ends up sounding like, you start coming up with a guitar riff. Now and that's just based off of that scale right there. So hopefully, I'm hoping that that's helpful to you. That was one thing. And this scale that I'm showing you here, find a scale anywhere on the guitar where you're using your first 2 strings, your low string and your 2nd string. And you could be tuned up to regular tuning or a drop D. I just prefer the drop D because I can configure a lot of things more tightly. Like that last one I just did, that would probably be a stretch if you were playing it in regular power chords. Possible, but it takes less effort when you're in the drop D, and you can make things a lot tighter. So let's see here. Now the other one, this is actually something that I picked up from a dude online. Again, we're going to use the low E string, and this is another scale. This is basically your pentatonic scale, and we're going to climb all the way from the beginning all the way up to the 12th fret, and we're going to use just the low E string with no distortion. So this is going to be like our pentatonic scale basically. So here we go. Okay, so that's the pentatonic scale, just played on the 1 low E string, going all the way from 0 all the way up to the top, the 12th fret. So now, let's see here. So I'll do it again. Oh, hang on. Okay. Now since we're in a drop D, any one of those, if you bar across and you hit your 2nd 2 string, so that's our pentatonic scale, all in power chords. Okay, so now, and you can play with that and make rhythm on it. You can go anywhere from. And all that is. So that's playing like that with the pentatonic scale. Okay, so you're looking for a group of chords that look good together between your first 2 strings. And like I said, I like start point of number 1. Okay, when I'm in a drop D, because this scale here, when I'm going up and down, okay, that whole scale right there, although the higher notes don't apply to my chord progressions, if you learn the whole scale, you can solo to the riffs you make in relation to the chord progressions you make. So let's see here. Now that was that, and I played that one already. And that first riff I showed you the other day, that's also in this too, because it goes. Okay, so think of that as a solo, and it's like this. Let's see. Okay, now let's try. Now you seen that? That's all it is. It's just hanging out in that scale with that group of chords. But when I do something like this to it, it sounds kind of cool. So there's those two lessons. Now, bouncing back and forth between the two strings is another one, because you have a hard time. I'm trying to take it out of. I'm in clear channel now. So that was one. I'm a big fan of the start point on your first fret, because all that chord progression, it gives you a good solid sound. And I mean, there's so many different cool things you can do, from like starting up here. Like this here. Okay, so that sounds kind of cool. Now let's put power chords to it, and use your root as just a finger. So we're the second string in third to fifth on the first, to first on the second, to third, to first. Now here's the power chords to it. Okay, so as long as you find some kind of solo that sounds good, and then you end up putting your power chords in use while you're doing it. So let's see, let's try another one. Now, instead of being on here, we're going to go open and use the pentatonic, like I'm saying. The pentatonic and the scale that I was doing, you pretty much, the goal in like rock and metal music is to skip when you do a step. Like here, we're open on the first string. Now we go up to here. That's a step, so it's like two frets up to here. So you're to get that classic rock metal sound, you got to skip like one or two, and you got to continue on with the scale throughout. Here we go though. So here's another one I'm gonna lay on you here. Okay, so open to three on the second string, to five, to five. Now let's put power chords to it. So I think that's kind of cool anyway. I think that's like Rage Against the Machine or something like that too, if I'm not mistaken. So, and then from that, here's another cool riff I came out with and I like it. So I'm just going to play it, then I'll explain it a little bit. I may have the right effect on here. So speed and everything on all this is going to come to you in time, but if you start using that basic principle, I think that might help you a little bit. I mean, as far as going over your scales and trying to find a group that sounds good together. And don't be afraid, like down here low, it seems to me as though if you go number 1 and number 3, you're in relation with the first set of chords here as well. So you go And you know, you just got to goof around with all of them and work on your speed and getting good at all of them. But remember what I said, use your very first finger, okay, that goes on a power chord as your root. And if you create a solo that sounds good like I showed you before, and then you put your distortion with it, then you got it. So I'm hoping that's helpful to you. And all right, we'll try this again some other time, and tell me what you think of this one. All right, I'll talk to you later, pal.